All right, everybody, welcome back. And this is actually our last session of the day before we get to that 100K announcement. We have a really awesome panel set up for you. And so I'm super excited to hear what they're going to talk about, investing in dual use human performance technology. And so with that, I'd like to bring to the stage the founder of Defense Investor Network, Heather Richman. Heather, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I think last panel, I guess, with content, usually this is when we, when I say that I'm standing between you and a beer, but we're on Zoom, so feel free, I guess. Thank you guys for having me. I'm coming at you from Palo Alto, California, where the weather is pretty nice today. And I'm excited. I know that you guys have just witnessed a number of really fantastic technology companies, kind of vying for the opportunity to work with and integrate with our military. I do say this as a pitch competition, and there's technically one winner, but I find that the real value from these sorts of competition, these sorts of opportunities is really the exposure. So I'm thrilled that such high caliber teams and companies are coming to the table. We need you guys more than ever. So without further ado, my name's Heather Richman. Again, based in Palo Alto, California. My day job, I work for a group called BMNT. We are basically a consultancy that works on innovation with internal military and IC customers. My day job, my evening job, in my spare time, I run something and founded something called the Defense Investor Network, where we're a discrete organization of mission-focused investors, and I'll leave it at that for right now. We'll get back onto it. We've got some really great panelists here, and I think before I get into them, I'm excited. We usually see the pitch competitions, and we see those that are vying for contracts, or that we see the awarding of contracts, but it's rare that you get kind of behind the scenes where you actually see what happens after that. So I'm excited to actually bring back last year's $100,000 award winner, Scott Hastings, the CEO of JPEG. They have a really incredible technology, but really most importantly, we've got both the customer from the insights. We've got AFWorks going to talk about, Scott Frame from AFWorks is going to talk about kind of their need that they're seeing on the AR/VR space. Eric is the Chief Product Officer of Air Education and Training Command for the U.S. Air Force. Finally, Dave Vitale is going to come at us from Maryland. He's at CACI, Senior Technical Manager there. And I think the part that a lot of us don't really understand is when you've got a startup and you've got a customer, how does all that actually go down? And how do these things actually transition? How does it all work? And I know that Dave has some very institutional knowledge about that, about the way things used to work, and about the way folks kind of on the prime side are changing the way they're doing business and changing their techniques to make this a lot easier for the startup community. So guys, welcome so much. Eric, I'm going to start with you. If you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're sitting right now, and go for it.
Well, so my name is Lieutenant Colonel Eric Fram. I'm active duty officer assigned to a little thing called AFRL Austin. So I sit with AFWorks in Capitol Factory every day, which is, I'm pretty sure, the best job in the Air Force. So my primary duties are looking across what we call the education and training portfolio for an office called Strategic Developmental Planning and Experimentation for the Air Force. And on a day-to-day basis, I oversee a program called Pilot Training Transformation, which on the acquisition side of it is looking at a lot of VR, AR technologies, and then data streams that can come off of our devices to optimize our training so that we are selecting the best possible candidates, putting them in through training, optimizing the training delivery that we give them so that they have the best, most efficient process possible.
Awesome. Eric, thank you. Next, we've got Scott Hastings, CEO of ZPEG.
Hey, thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. So my name's Scott Hastings. I'm CEO of ZPEG. We're a video compression company that's focused on bringing the next generation of video codec specifically for virtual reality and live streaming. As Heather mentioned, we're the $100,000 winner from last year, so it's kind of fun to see this go all the way back around. A little bit about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur with kind of, you got to be for video compression, a multidisciplinary background, right? So it's software with a little bit of neuroscience mixed in with a bunch of business development in there too.
Awesome. Scott, thank you. Finally, Dave Vitale from CACI.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Dave Vitale, as stated. My primary objective in this current role is really weaponizing a lot of the innovative technologies that we have internal to meet kind of current and emerging customer needs. A piece of that is obviously we have finally recognized the power of harnessing dual use technologies, which you'll see today. My background is mostly in the intelligence community. I was also an Air Force officer many moons ago. I was an intelligence officer for some period of time, which predated about 10 years in the intelligence community in a variety of roles, from engineering to operations. So kind of an interesting background to parlay into a technology company where I sit now.
Awesome. Thank you. Scott, I'm gonna pick on you first. So first off, congratulations. It's, you're kind of coming back with the Miss America crown. You get to pass on in a little bit here, all right? So what got you interested? I mean, your technology is in high demand these days. What made you, as a serial entrepreneur, you've clearly been around the block. What made you interested in working with the military? What kind of first spurred that?
Yeah, no, it was a lot. Working specifically with the military was, as the Futures Command got here, we saw the opportunity to actually be able to leverage the opportunities, specifically with us being here in Austin, but then the availability, which we did never see feasible before. And so where it was something we wouldn't approach last year. And then, once that happened, things just happened to move fast, which winning the 100,000 and moving to this was just a combination of opportunity, meets what the new direction the U.S. military has been giving us opportunities.
And can you talk a little bit about, I know I'm guessing there's some investors in the audience, and I definitely know many startups. I mean, what has the process been like? I hear all sorts of stuff from Silicon Valley about what that process is like. Can you shed a little light?
I feel like we've had a atypical journey, and I think it's necessary for video compression because it's a long haul. You're talking a video compression codec. I mean, the current standards of 200, probably 200 man years is not a false exaggeration of how long it's taken to develop them. So we've been able to do most of the funding. We've done internal funding from the success of our previous businesses that we've had.
Awesome. And then I know that typically, like I said, we don't see kind of the integration then afterwards of a startup then with, a larger player. Dave, I'd love to hear kind of how you, after they won, how this kind of relationship developed and kind of where it's gone.
Yeah, so it's been a great partnership, and a lot of that has to do with Scott and Raymond really just being great guys and easy to work with. So the whole process really started with one of my colleagues who's really kind of the front runner and face of CACI at the Capital Factory, Kevin Farmer, running into them at the 100K challenge. So if it weren't for the Capital Factory and the ecosystem it puts together, we probably never would have passed each other in the night, so to speak. So Kevin kind of immediately recognized the value and the widespread application of the technology that they had at the time. So he kind of brought that back to the table, and we immediately started looking at current customer problems that we had, current products that were having some shortcomings in this particular area, and it really made sense for us. So we kind of aggressively pursued them. The relationship matured over some series of months. Kevin flew me out to meet with them, and we got to put a face to a name. And from there, it's like I said, it's been pretty seamless. We were able to secure some internal funding to incubate this technology because we thought it was really high potential, and it's gone from there.
Internal funding, meaning inside of your organization?
Correct. Yeah, within CACI.
Okay, awesome. You said something about current customer problems. So Eric, I'm going to turn to you as the representative of the problems. Can you talk a little bit more? This is right up your alley. So like what, as you guys are kind of curating problems from the inside of the Air Force, what does that process look like? And then how are you, putting those problems out there, so that folks like, Scott at ZPEG can respond to those?
Yeah, well, so we may be a little bit atypical at Air Education Training Command with the Pilot Training Transformation Program, but happy to talk through kind of the way we're doing it. But I think, show me a program, I'll show you a way of acquiring something. So, they're really all different. That's part of what makes entering the government space a challenge. But, the way that I think about it is I go to the McKinsey model of Horizon 1, 2, and 3. The 3 being the long-term stuff that's probably, 5 years plus from being used. And that's where, we tend to look towards places like Air Force Research Lab to incubate these technologies. It's a lot like what CACI is doing, in fact. And it's at that level, it's a lot about developing intellectual property. You know, some of it will be owned by the government, some of it will be owned by industry. A lot of academic involvement as well. And you know, the vehicles for that sort of a thing that are really common is STTR, which is it's basically the version of SBIR, which I think most of the Capital Factory audience is familiar with, but it's more optimized towards more nascent stage technologies that are pre-commercialization. Where I start coming into play is as things hit what's called technology readiness level 5, 6, something in that area, where it's somewhere less than 5, probably a little bit more than 2 years away from being fielded, active, and put into active use. And where I try to live is I identify, I take a kind of a strategic aim of where, in my case, pilot training transformation is at and where it's trying to go. I'm looking at its active development cycle and trying to think a step ahead to say, okay, well, what's the next logical step we would want to take if this step we're on right now is successful? And what are the blockers that prevent us from moving there today? And then I go and I look for companies. ZPEG is one example that can fulfill one aspect of that problem.
Okay.
And then we start bringing in other tools. Where I live, it's a little bit more that commercialization phase, where there's a small company that has taken a technology out of a lab and is starting to put it into the commercial space. It's starting to gain some traction. That's when it really becomes a candidate for our SBIR program, which is Small Business Innovation Research. And what's great about that is similar. It sounds a lot like what CACI is doing. It's non-dilutive funding. We don't take really significant intellectual property rights. We basically have government use rights to the technologies that are developed inside of that SBIR, but everything developed prior to that remains the company's to market freely. And really, even the government use rights, you can still market that freely. It's just the government has the use rights to that that next increment of technology that was developed using that funding. And what we try to do there is in that SBIR period. For example, is incubate the technology to a place where it's ready to integrate with the fielded solution that we have, or in my case, that we are developing. And so what I'm developing kind of in that Horizon 1 level, the 2 years and below, is a microservices architecture that is optimized for flying training. So highly flexible, highly adaptable, very future-proof. Everything is open. And it's designed from the ground up to be able to plug these apps in and make the integration process easy. But having said that, there's something I say a lot, which is, small businesses can create widgets, but you need an institution to solve a problem, and that is where we bring in the large systems integrators to do that work. In my case, we're still kind of playing with some more fundamental concepts. So the government, in many ways, is playing the systems integrator in my particular program. But with a recent solicitation we put out through DIU, we are going to do, I think, 6 different contracts for all the major areas of this platform we're trying to produce. And those have, it's a mix of small and large companies, or at least more mature small companies. So it does not tend to be a true, your 2-3 person startup. But we are relying on a number of 2- and 3-person startups to provide components of the final, thing that we're trying to build. So that's kind of how it all comes together for us. As I think has been a recurring theme throughout the last 3 days, we really rely to do this well. We have to be collaborative at all levels. So, it's not about it's only a small company or only a big company. It's about really finding partners that can work with us and be willing to share in a free flow of communication back and forth where we can move trust.
No, it's awesome. And what you've just articulated to me is kind of this whole innovation pipeline. You've really kind of gone through the whole thing, and you're thinking about all the steps from the beginning, which I think is really important. And that's not something that I don't think every group is doing quite as effectively as you guys are doing. So just as far as the startups that are out there, it sounds like there's a lot of hand holding that's available that I know is needed. I hear a lot of feedback saying, warm intros are nice, but once we've got that SBIR, we're then, phase 1, we're then told to go find a customer inside, which is a really challenging thing to do for a startup. So the other thing I've heard you all mention is kind of the just the fact that Capital Factory and Austin as a whole has really kind of brought you together and forced these, I wouldn't say forced, enabled these interactions and stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it sounds like a great model that we could develop in other places. And I'm throwing that out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that. I mean, I think that what's interesting is for me, I mean, in particular, because this is way outside of what would ordinarily be my element, is it's just really nice to be able to walk down the hall and chat with a friend about some technology area that I just have a question about, because it helps me find those gaps, and then and in the process, we're able to give really free feedback to a company, as we're conducting that market research about, what our use case looks like. And then meanwhile, CACI is more than capable of talking about, their participation in Capital Factory, but they're able to do the same thing. So I think that these types of environments are incredibly important. There are not very many of them. I can't wait till we can get back from COVID and get back to it, because it's really disruptive to be removed from that.
Awesome. And you mentioned, and this is actually for all of you, because I think you'll all have a little bit of a different take, but a couple times, Eric, you mentioned just IP rights. And I know we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I know that is something that I get asked about all the time, both working with integrators and with primes, working with the military. So how has that process been? Scott, what's your level of concern, or is it something that's been, made okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and something especially a lot of the audience might like to know, working with a prime, like how that's worked. And I think CACI has been, I can't speak for every prime, but I can speak specifically of CACI. And that's been an awesome process. There's been no concerns where, I think it's a fair process with stuff that they're funding. They have some of the rights to, and they have the right to for the government sector, but yet left us alone with most of our, intellectual property the whole time. And so I personally couldn't be happier with the situation. I think it's a fair way to go.
Dave, could you touch on that a little bit just from your standpoint?
Yeah, so we came up with I think a fairly innovative agreement, and it's somewhat unique in that Scott's group is predominantly focused on the commercial sector. So for those firms that are really positioned exclusively in the consumer arena, it's pretty easy to bifurcate the areas of responsibility, essentially. So we came up with an agreement that would provide us some level of exclusive access to federal markets specifically, which is CACI's primary area of concern. But at the same time, that same investment that we made to help further their technology, they can immediately take and use in commercial markets. So it really created a win-win situation. It doesn't always end up being that clean, but ultimately, I think both groups here are benefiting well. So it's been a good partnership.
Awesome. Well, I want to dig in a little bit now with Scott, really on your core technology. Just I watched the show Silicon Valley, and sorry, when I hear video compression, that's what I think about. But we'd love to just personally, just from a curiosity standpoint, would love to know a little bit more about ZPEG and about the tech that you guys are developing, and then kind of how it's been beneficial to CACI.
Yeah, no, of course. First off, be careful what you ask for here. I have a tendency to go on and on about this because I love doing it, and that's really what I do. But the core to it and what we're doing is trying to rethink the way that video compression is done, right? And the problem is, especially for live streaming and VR, we're trying to, the current state of the art, like the codec we're talking over right now, you're seeing the image, while good, it's still based on technology and thoughts of, that were invented in the early 90s for differences of frames and things that just keep on building and building upon that. Nobody's gone back and tried to rethink the way that video compression is done, which has inherent limitations. And so what we've done and worked with CACI on is building a new codec, a way of coming forward and keeping all the good stuff for the current codecs and getting some other things. And so I won't go into the details unless you really want to about how it all works. But I think what the result is we're developing a codec that has very low swap. It doesn't take a lot of computational power. I mean, just for instance, we'll see how it goes, but I mean, roughly 1/10,000th to 1/100,000th the necessary computer cycles to compress versus what we're talking about now. So you can think of what that has to do with battery life and when VR headsets and things like that. And not only that, but ability to process far more pixels within a single space. But then it's also we should have, and our early indications are we're going to hit the same compression numbers or a little higher than the current standards, which take you can't even do on your home computer. It takes not in real time. And then we're also working to get frame latency down, which is important for VR, and then also any live streaming, especially the military, where we're looking at building out subframe latency. So not even waiting a whole frame, where the codec we're looking at right now has got we're looking at about 200 milliseconds right now to half a second, where we're looking at one, I can't even think about it, but we're looking at one line at a time, which would be like 10 milliseconds or something. And then, we're also looking at building it where whenever your bandwidth gets constrained, or for instance, in the military environment, you're having jamming, you have a opponent, a bad actor trying to jam your signal. What we do is adapt to changing channel conditions. So you're always we're building it so you always get the optimal, an optimal picture based on your bandwidth. So if you got more bandwidth, boom, your picture goes up. But if your bandwidth goes down, or somebody tries to jam your signal, it goes out. So that's kind of how you kind of build the state of the art to kind of take advantage of the unique things. And then also with VR, adapting to changing angles and things that current codecs can't do as well.
And how is this differing? I know that a lot of startups are commercially focused, and it sounds like you were as well, at least initially. How is what you're doing right now, for the military, different from what you've been doing for the commercial sector?
Yeah, so for the commercial sector, our first product was adapting and working with the existing codecs, which might have some applicability here as well, but this is with the military and things, we can go way into we have the big advantages. We have control of both sides often of the application, which allows us to take advantage of this, because we don't have to be completely standards compliant to every TV in the world or something like that. But in general, I mean, it will be applicable to the commercial environment as well. And some of the other technologies we're developing along with this will have, other applications such as images and things, which some of the big companies are already reaching out to us about.
So how big is your company right now?
Extremely small. It's unfortunate that, we've got a dedicated group of engineers. We've got 3 of us plus a couple business developers. So I guess total 4.5 full-time employees.
Wow. Okay. So perfect. Because I run into small companies, quite often, and they said, we're not big enough. There's absolutely no way, that we could start engaging. And so, I mean, what was your initial thought? And then, what has this process been like? I mean, I'm sure you're also, still looking at the commercial sector. So how
right.
how have you done it? How have you managed it?
A lot of hard work and chutzpah, I guess. Yeah, you just keep on, pounding away until they can't ignore you anymore. For some of those companies, I mean, we've just been very fortunate that we've been able to get into, most of them and get heard. But I think at the end of the day, great tech wins out, and if you can show enough value, people will pay attention.
Okay. Awesome. Dave, over to you. I read this. So this kind of partnership you called a project-based incubation. And that is not a normal thing that primes talk about. So I'd love to hear, like, if you'd be willing to walk through kind of the process you've gone through with ZPEG, I think it'd be really helpful.
Sure. So it's really tailored toward taking generally an existing technology and iterating it to the next increment, as Eric pointed out. And a lot of it's focused directly toward problems that our company is seeing in both in the opportunity pipeline and with our cadre of executives that are constantly interacting with various customers. So we have a number of different, I would say, priority imperatives that we're out kind of actively seeking for, and Capital Factories, like I said, has been an excellent vehicle for enabling those types of interactions. And once we identify one, in particular, in working with the Capital Factory, makes it a lot easier because you're working with a curated list of firms within their portfolio that have interest in working in the defense sector. So there's plenty of companies that we approach that have minimal to no interest in applying the technology in that realm. So that helps kind of put the process on the fast track. So in the case of ZPEG, we identified the need, identified the technology, and went through the agreement process pretty rapidly rapidly for a prime, that is, within 2 to 3 months, because we did have to line up some additional money that we had not set aside. So our existing kind of incubation budget had already been maxed out, but we recognized the potential here, and we're able to go back, advocate, shake loose some money, and be able to invest in this particular project with the ZPEG gentleman.
And so it's just a year ago, Scott, that you won, and so we're a year later. So where does this whole project sit? What's the status?
Yeah, no, we're at the point, because what we had won with last year was actually working with the existing technology, and so that was a product ready to go at market ready. And then what we've developed now in the last, working with CACI in the sense, we've just now finished. We have a working codec that works, on the subframe latency. So it's the millisecond compression, and we're on the track. We've been able to pass the current codecs a little bit for compression ratios and also blowing away and swap. So it's not production ready yet, but it's getting in the neighborhood.
Okay. And then Dave, is your relationship now in your collaboration, is that going to take them all the way, or what does that look like now? Has that grown?
It has. In fact, there's been some other interest from other firms that we're starting to work with now. It's gaining traction within the company writ large. We actually have 3 different groups internally that we're talking to as potential integrators who have existing products. And as I mentioned, there's a pretty large opportunity pipeline that we maintain, that we're able to inject a lot of these types of either technology enablers, which is kind of where the technology is now, and then also identify areas where we can apply their tech and integrate it directly. Because as it stands right now, it could be molded and optimized for a variety of different applications or products.
And how big is CACI? How big is your organization?
About 23,000 people.
Okay, so it's a big group. And so you talked about talking to customers and kind of that need and kind of finding out their needs for technology, their problems. Are those customers internal military folks that you're encountering inside Capital Factory, or who are your customers typically?
It really spans the gamut in the federal market space. So it's everywhere from DoD to almost every major IC partner, federal law enforcement, so on and so forth. We have touch points, I would say, at all different levels within customer hierarchical structures. At kind of the very top level, we have executives who are earmarked to be the direct interface at those levels within those customer organizations. And then we have obviously hundreds of contracts with smaller groups or representatives within those customers that we're pretty fastidious about feeding or kind of pulling feedback from those mechanisms to understand what are the pressing problems so that we can identify a strategy to solve them either near term or invest in technology enablers to serve them in more of the 3 to 5 year time frame to shape it.
So it sounds like typically when I've encountered startups that are working with, they want a CIBR or they're kind of working with one organization inside the military or the IC. It sounds like you guys really can kind of step back and have a much broader view of what I like to call the military addressable market, or the MAM, or the national security addressable market, but really looking at, how can ZPEG fit into a number of different customers, not just potentially. So this is an AAL award, right? Is that right? This one, your original last year, was it an AAL problem, or who was the military sponsor of the problem, or was there not one? No, I'm making that up. That's good. But it's well,
I believe it was it was a Cap Factory award.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just aligned against some Army priorities.
Okay. So Army. So Eric, I'll go back to you quickly. So if you're looking, I mean, you're looking at Air Force, right? And obviously, like you said, this came out as kind of an Army priority. Personally, I've done some work with JIDO, the Joint Improvised Threat Defeat Organization, on this. So, I mean, Eric, as you're looking at how to solve these problems, but then more broadly, as you're working with companies now whose investors are looking across market, right? You're kind of competing with the commercial side for attention and able to, to say, yes, we've got need within the Air Force for this amount of money, but hey, there's other groups inside the military and the IC that might also need this sort of technology. I mean, how is that something that's happening right now, or is that something that's still pretty siloed?
I think it's happening. It's doing better, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement all at the same time. I think that the synthetic training environment has a lot of really great goals, and they're marching down their own path for their own priorities, and we're doing the same. And where they intersect is great, and there's a lot of goodness there, but they don't necessarily always intersect in every way. So it's kind of, that's why we have separate programs. If they were perfectly aligned, we would just join on. But where the Army is trying to go with synthetic training environment is for a much broader thing than what we're trying to do with pilot training transformation, where it is a lot more focused. And so there are just different elements, different time horizons to the different goals. And then they're just large programs, and it's hard, amidst kind of the day-to-day bustle to break out and, go and do, a major technology review to bring somebody up to speed on where you're at so that you can figure out where the collaboration is. It's just, there's a lot of friction there. And I think you'll see that, that's not a problem that's just focused inside the government. That's everywhere. But where I do think there's been a lot of success is, within this, we used to call it the Austin National Security Innovation Network, this thing that's happening in Texas. I'm not sure what we're calling it anymore, but where we're able to span across the state, across all these organizations that have, by hook or by crook shown up in Austin. And we're talking on an interpersonal level quite a bit. And so, I'm aware of things like STI over in the Army, whereas I probably wouldn't have been aware of it otherwise. It's a huge program. It's just, there's just so much going on in the government. I think the important thing to remember is the government space is as big as a global marketplace unto itself, and it is sized that way. It is as broad as that, and so collaboration across it is just naturally hard. What we are doing, and as a result of this collaboration, though, is so, for example, my program, I'm leveraging things coming out of Air Force Research Lab, both on the technology side, but also on the contractual side. And then, when we turned it from a $3 million little pet project into a $120 million program, we needed some more high-powered thinking and acquisition strategies, so we took it to DIU. And that's where they're really specialized. So we're starting to be able to use these various organizations for what they're really good at, and recognizing where everybody's strengths and weaknesses are. And again, because we're collaborative, we're able to not keep a stranglehold and pretend we can do everything from soup to nuts.
Just really fast, we've got some questions coming in, but just really quickly, Eric, would you just spend a minute or less just on what DIU stands for and what it is?
Yeah, Defense Innovation Unit, and so they are each military service is the military service, but they work in the Department of Defense, and so they work for at the Department of Defense level for scalable programs that can serve a joint military need. So.
Okay. And do they have different locations around the country?
Yeah, so there's three primary locations. So they have Mountain View is where they're headquartered out in California, right across the street from you, as a matter of fact. And then they have another major location in Boston, and then they have a smaller presence there at Capital Factory or in Austin. They just moved over a few blocks away. So.
Awesome. Well, I am got a few questions coming in there. They seem to be a little bit investor focused, so I might put my own 2 cents in for a second. Number one, are human performance technologies with roots in academically funded projects more appealing to investors, or I guess appealing to all of you as well?
I'd love to hear everybody's opinion, but when I think about this, like I personally think that yes, it's more appealing in the sense that investors, the main thing they care about is de-risking, right? And so with an academically funded project, we're able to de-risk a lot, where we know that it's going to work. Where is it going to go? So that's kind of my take, is it's de-risked. For instance, like our technology, you'll be able to know at that point whether it works, and you're not going to have to pay for that seed stage where you're like, wait, what am I buying here? Where it's a project, it's already a fully fleshed out, ready to go product at that time.
I'll take it one step further, Scott. So then working with the military and being able to de-risk even further, right? And then being incubated by a large. I mean, what's been the investor reaction to that and to your involvement?
Actually, we haven't been taking it. We're not ready for a next round yet, and haven't done it. Like, I'm trying to wait till the last moment I can to go raise cash, even though I think we might pursue that in another 3 or 4 months or so.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Number 2. How can investors avoid the trap of investing in a tech that's too oriented towards public or defense sector applications and thus dependent on public funding?
I'm not an investor, but I just say look at commercial traction, and that's if you're trying to get a SBIR, that is one of the defining criteria about whether you're going to be successful or not. So what is the traction in the commercial marketplace and the potential over there?
And that's something that you guys look at. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And our goal is to seed that next stage of development that's going to take that product to the next level, where it becomes self-sustaining, and in something like a subscription-based model, we see the benefits of all that R&D that goes back into it from the commercial marketplace, and so that's absolutely something we look at.
Dave, kind of what's your take? I mean, you guys are at an interesting intersection there. I'm not sure you're considering yourselves investors per se, but you're absolutely putting money into these companies. So what's kind of your take on that?
Sure. We also look toward some sort of commercial success, again, mostly to de-risk the technical feasibility of the approach, because that's obviously one of the primary challenges, is trying to sift through what are shallow promises and what have actual premise to them. As far as being concerned about the primary thrust area being in public and defense, that's fairly minimal for us, given our primary focus is in defense markets. And often some of these technologies, there are some cases where there are no dual use adjacencies, or the manner in which you're applying the technology really has no commercial analog. And in those are a little more challenging, I would say, and inherently more risky, but we're still interested in pursuing those types of options.
Okay, awesome, thank you. We've got 2 more. I think we're going to get in here. Given the rapid development of human performance-focused technologies, should investors consider potential ethical and moral implications of technology designed to enhance human capabilities? Ethical, moral, anyone?
I think that's an easy one. Yes. I think we should always be considering that. What does that mean in practice, and in terms of decision making is obviously up to the individual investor and dependent entirely upon the technology. Yeah. But I think that our experience over the last several years has taught us that we should think about that stuff, and we really rely on, again, that dialogue with industry and academia to understand the implications of the technologies that we're buying. And so, we need help thinking that through, so that we can use the technology in a moral and ethical way. And so, I know in throughout the DoD, some of the most concerned people, I work a lot with AI. Some of the most concerned people I have ever met with the ethical implications of AI are wearing uniforms. And I can promise you, because the other folks wearing other uniforms are not nearly as concerned with those sorts of things. So, ethics and morals are always a double-edged sword, and we have got to. We absolutely must find ways to bridge this military-civilian divide of technology, if frankly our way of life is going to survive. So that is the AI future that's coming for us, and we have got to engage in that conversation in a really robust way to do it the right way.
Eric, thank you. All right, we've got Keith Hamilton a few seconds ago said, congratulations on the win, Scott DeScrio. What could the government have improved upon as part of the overall process working with the commercial marketplace?
Yeah, no, first off, thanks. I appreciate the congrats. I feel like one of the things that could happen, and I understand there's a lot of change that has happened in a very rapid time with the military, even being able to work with a company like ZPEG. But I feel like we've been relatively lucky, right? With the access we've had, with CACI, and then also winning last year. And I think that a broader access for other people, like if we didn't have CACI, it would be very difficult for us to find relevant, people that would take us not only seriously, but also find the projects or even know. I mean, I'm still completely ignorant when it comes to like all the acronyms and how to navigate and what the correct things to say.
I have a list. I'll send you the list.
And so with that, better be able to communicate back and forth, and then also see what opportunities are there. Like, let's go, because we're all on the same page here. We've got problems we want to do and solve. So the U.S. military, is the most ready that we, in the world. And to do that, we can leverage the tech and what we're doing here, but make it a little more accessible and know what opportunities are there.
Okay, awesome. How might AFWorks or CACI collaborate, partner, fund international startups? We've got an Aerostat ISR tech from Brazil or Amigo Cloud GEO tech from Peru. Thank you. So as far as international startups, how do you guys approach those, Dave?
Those we've had, I would say, less engagement with historically, but we're starting to look more so externally for those types of partnerships. There's a lot of power and benefit in diversity of thought, expertise, and products, and that doesn't all necessarily reside within the United States. So we're engaged globally. Obviously, we actually have an office in Europe, as well as a number of globally centric products, we'll say. So I think there's a wide opportunity scape there. A lot of it is involving ourselves in interactions and groups that expose us to international startups. I think that's probably predominantly been the reason it's been pretty minimal thus far, is we don't have the touch points and the engagement mechanisms there.
Eric, any thoughts?
So on companies, it depends on the particular solicitation that's out there. So some are restricted to U.S. only,
Okay.
Others are not such. For example, with the DIU solicitation we just completed, which is a pretty major solicitation, that one was not restricted at all, and we in fact did partner with some foreign entities. On the SBIR side, where AFWorks lives, so this is different. I know this is complex, so I apologize, but on like the AFWorks SBIR solicitations, those are U.S. only. However, there are ways you can license IP into the U.S. and have a U.S. entity conduct that activity. The specific rule is that greater than 50% of the ownership has to be in the United States. But these are things that attorneys can help a company with setting up a U.S. entity that's eligible for those sorts of things that do require a U.S. entity. There are issues that arise with our international trafficking arms relations that need to be navigated. Again, that's what people with law degrees help out with. But so there are ways around it.
Okay, thank you. We've got, I think, one more. Oh no, I'm being told to thank you. Thank you guys. This was incredible. I've started companies. I work with a lot of startups, and Scott, I'm thrilled for the collaboration here in the sense that you guys have found, and thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being willing to work with the government. It's important. Dave, thank you, and thank you to CACI for what you guys are doing and kind of working with these earlier stage companies and being forthcoming with that process. And Eric, thank you for your service and for getting in here and digging in. And as you said, the face of war is changing, and the way that we're all needing to come together to combat it is changing. So I thank you. I'm excited to see who won. And again, thanks you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather.